In 1969, a man appeared at the entrance of a psychiatric hospital in the United States. He seemed anxious and exhausted. He told the staff he'd been hearing voices in his head, voices that kept repeating words like empty, hollow, and thud. After a brief evaluation, he was diagnosed with a mental illness and admitted to the hospital. But shortly after his admission procedures were complete, the patient reported that the voices had completely vanished. He said he was feeling much better. The hospital staff didn't take this claim seriously. After all, it seemed impossible for a patient to recover so quickly. So they continued to hold this person, who in reality had no mental illness at all, and kept him on medication for 3 full weeks. How do I know he wasn't actually ill? Because that man was David Rosenhan, a professor of psychology at Stanford University. His visit to that hospital was part of an experiment he was conducting. If you subscribe and like the video, let's move on to the story. The year 1973 was a significant turning point in the field of psychiatry. At the heart of this shift was a groundbreaking experiment by Stanford University psychiatry professor David Rosenhan, which sent shockwaves through the psychiatric community. This study raised radical and thought-provoking questions about the assessment of mental health and the reliability of psychiatric diagnoses, creating a massive stir in the world of psychiatry. When the calendar hit 1973, Professor David Rosenhan began the work on what would come to be known as the Rosenhan experiment. On paper, the experiment's objective seemed quite straightforward: to conduct an in-depth investigation into the crisis of confidence within psychiatry. The professor believed that psychiatric diagnoses were often subjective. He suspected that doctors' decisions were heavily influenced by their individual perspectives, feelings, and personal perceptions, and that these diagnoses often failed to reflect the true psychological state of the individuals. To test these ideas, he designed an experiment to measure just how reliable psychiatric evaluations truly were. For this study, he assembled a group of 8 volunteers from various professions, including himself. The group consisted of 3 psychologists, 1 psychiatrist, a student, a pedagogue, a housewife, and a painter. The most crucial criterion for selecting these participants was that they were, as far as anyone knew, mentally healthy individuals who were interested in psychology and could convincingly act out a role. This newly formed group underwent brief training and was given instructions to seek admission at different psychiatric hospitals across the United States. Even if they had tried to guess what would happen, the participants could never have predicted the ordeal they were about to face. But one way or another, the experiment had begun. During the initial phase of the project, the participants sought admission to various mental institutions by uniformly faking the same symptom. They claimed to be experiencing auditory hallucinations. Specifically, they described these voices as being vague and difficult to comprehend, carefully avoiding any concrete descriptions. It was imperative to the study's design that they maintain this deception and under no circumstances reveal their involvement in the experiment. All 8 participants, none of whom had any acting training and were simply playing the part of someone hearing voices, were successfully admitted to the various hospitals they applied to. They were all told they needed treatment. Let me repeat that. These were ordinary people, not professional actors, just trying their best to pretend they had a psychological issue. Their 100% success rate in getting admitted was one of the most shocking and crucial findings of the entire experiment. The experimental design also included a variety of clinics to test whether the quality of the hospital made a difference. Private hospitals, rural state hospitals, and major urban university hospitals were all part of the study. This diversity was critical, as it aimed to observe how the experiment's results would vary under different conditions and environments. When applying, the participants gave their real names and professions. However, to avoid influencing the diagnosis, they refrained from giving detailed information about their personal lives. The only lie they told, just once, was about the voices in their heads. After that, they were instructed not to feign any strange behaviors and to act exactly as they normally would. Every single participant was diagnosed with a serious psychiatric disorder, such as schizophrenia, and these weren't relatively minor diagnoses like obsessive-compulsive disorder or anxiety. 7 of the 8 pseudo-patients were diagnosed with schizophrenia. 1 was diagnosed with manic-depressive psychosis, now known as bipolar disorder. And remember, all they had done was complain about hearing voices. These diagnoses alone were enough to expose just how subjective the assessment process could be. But David Rosenhan wasn't satisfied with this initial result. He wanted to continue, and his insistence would turn what might have been a simple 1 or 2-day stay into something far more significant. In the second phase of the experiment, the participants were instructed to behave completely normally within the hospital environment. They were to report that their symptoms had vanished and that they felt perfectly fine. They socialized with other patients, participated in therapy sessions, and were supposed to take the medications they were given. All the while, they were taking detailed notes on how the hospital staff evaluated them, how their normal behaviors were perceived, and what kinds of treatments were being administered. But despite acting normally from the moment they were admitted and consistently stating they were well, their doctors and nurses continued their treatment for weeks. This is where things started to get terrifying. A fascinating observation emerged during the second phase. The hospital staff began interpreting the participants' completely normal behaviors as abnormal. For example, when a nurse noticed one participant keeping a journal, she recorded this behavior in his file as patient engages in writing behavior, as if the journaling itself was a pathological compulsion stemming from his illness. The participants' explanations about their daily lives, the way they drank water, or how they ate their food were all seen by the staff as evidence of schizophrenia or bipolar disorder. You realize these are the kinds of things ordinary people do in their daily lives, right? And keep in mind, while one or two of these hospitals might have been underfunded, most were incredibly well equipped, and one was among the most expensive psychiatric facilities of its time. The situation was grim. For instance, information one participant shared about his family relationships and his children was interpreted as a sign of anger issues and a tendency to hit his kids, linking it directly to his supposed psychological condition. The days turned into a nightmare. The participants were forbidden from revealing they were part of an experiment, and nobody believed they weren't actually ill. During the course of their treatment, the earliest a participant was discharged was 7 days. The latest was 52 days. But critically, not a single one was discharged as cured or healthy. Instead, they were all discharged with the diagnosis of in remission, meaning the staff believed their illness was merely dormant and could return at any time. Considering none of them were ever sick to begin with, the situation was truly tragic. Even more striking, the actual patients in the hospitals were far more adept at spotting the fakes than the dozens of psychologists and nurses. Many real patients quickly realized something was off, with some even saying things like, "You can't be crazy. You must be a journalist or a professor here to inspect the hospital." The very people labeled as ill could see what the professionals could not. During this nightmarish process, the participants were prescribed over 2,000 pills for illnesses they didn't have. Thankfully, they managed to avoid taking the medication, discreetly disposing of it by flushing it down the toilet or throwing it into the garden. In yet another scandalous failure, not a single supervisor, nurse, or doctor ever noticed that these patients weren't taking their prescribed drugs. The hospital staff, doctors, and other employees would not discover the truth until after all the participants were discharged and David Rosenhan published his seminal article on being sane in insane places. Thankfully, as far as we know, all participants were discharged safely and the experiment concluded. The publication of Rosenhan's study in 1973 shocked the scientific community. It clearly demonstrated how hospital staff had misinterpreted normal behavior and how subjectively diagnoses were being applied. It revealed that psychiatric clinics were failing to accurately assess mental health, that individuals diagnosed with schizophrenia couldn't be recognized as sane. This implied that many patients currently in hospitals might be healthy enough for discharge, but doctors weren't looking at them that way. In the wake of the article, dozens of clinics reacted angrily toward David Rosenhan, accusing him of being a fraud and a cheat. The families of actual patients in these clinics began to protest, demanding to see their relatives who might have been healthy all along. But the clinics vehemently denied the findings, calling them an exaggerated work of fiction and a smear campaign. One hospital even issued a public challenge to David Rosenhan: "Send as many fake patients as you like over the next 3 months, and we guarantee we will be able to tell who is real and who is fake." This public challenge intrigued the professor. Based on his experience, he knew he couldn't trust the hospitals, but he felt he had to expose them completely. He accepted the challenge, telling the hospital he would send 1 or more pseudo-patients in the coming months and warn them that they wouldn't be able to find the real patients among them. We'll get to the result of that duel in a moment, but it wasn't just hospital owners Rosenhan was facing. Some of his own colleagues now stood against him. Nevertheless, it was becoming clear that the labels used in mental health assessment were inadequate for reflecting an individual's true state, and that the field of psychiatry needed radical change. One group of psychiatrists argued that the experiment eroded trust in psychiatric diagnoses, which could have negative effects on patients. They worried that truly ill people might reject their diagnosis, or that those who thought they were healthy might change their minds. But the experiment had made such an impact that the resulting debates led the American Psychiatric Association to conduct a more comprehensive review and update of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders in 1980. The impact wasn't limited to clinical psychology. Societal perceptions of mental illness also began to shift. Yes, mental health is crucial for people to feel secure. However, people can experience emotional difficulties, highs, and lows at various points in their lives, and this doesn't automatically mean they are mentally ill. This was the core message of the experiment. It highlighted the need to avoid stigmatizing individuals for these struggles. People going through a tough time shouldn't immediately be branded as mentally ill and ostracized from society. Because of this psychological impact and prejudice, people who could have recovered might develop a permanent mental illness. Or truly ill individuals could be misdiagnosed and pushed aside, causing serious psychological and physical harm to themselves and others. Imagine being told you have cancer when you don't, and being forced to undergo chemotherapy. Imagine trying to tell them you're healthy, but they refuse to believe you. Or the reverse. You go to the doctor with a real illness, and they send you home saying, "You're fine." I understand the situation in psychology is more complex than that, and I don't want to offend the experts or esteemed doctors in the field. But for those of us who aren't experts, our only recourse is to see an orthopedist for arm pain and a dentist for a toothache. In the same vein, when we face psychological issues, we hope for real healing, not just to be given a pill and sent home. And sometimes, as you can imagine, real healing isn't just about fixing a problem. Sometimes it's about learning that what we thought was a problem isn't one at all. Now, don't think I forgot. Let's get back to the duel between Rosenhan and the hospital. The 3 months had passed, and it was time to announce the results. During this period, 193 patients had come to that hospital with complaints and requested treatment. Naturally, since the hospital didn't know which of these 193 people were Rosenhan's fakes, they had to be extra thorough in their examinations. After the time was up, they proudly announced their findings to the public. According to them, out of the 193 new patients, 41 were identified as definite fakes, highly likely to be participants sent by Rosenhan. In fact, 19 of those 41 were turned away after their initial evaluation, deemed to be perfectly healthy without needing admission. Another 42 patients were classified as suspects. It was unclear whether they were genuinely ill or faking. The results were out. The hospital shared these numbers, seemingly restoring public trust by declaring they had caught Rosenhan's imposters and proving their own reliability. But Rosenhan's announcement about the outcome was another bombshell. The professor revealed that during the challenge period, he had sent exactly 0 pseudo-patients to the hospital. The fate of the 19 patients who were turned away, deemed healthy, remains an unknown in history. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please subscribe to the channel and like the video for more stories like this. You can turn on notifications to be updated on the new videos coming out each week.